Hello everybody, welcome back to another video. Today we are going to be transforming this Spruce village into a medieval town featuring a castle and docks. Let's get started, shall we? So before we begin, I should note that this is going to be a bit more of an extreme transformation, meaning we are not only going to transform the structures that are already here, but we're also going to be adding additional structures. So to start off with our transformation, we need to actually be able to see our village, so we're going to get rid of all these pesky trees. Don't worry, we'll add some back later. Now that we can see the layout of our village, I'm going to add in some wireframing for some structures that I want to add, like some towers in the back where the castle's going to be, and some docks towards the front and the mouth of the river. For the docks, I'm going to be sticking with a pretty basic palette. For this entire build, I want to stick with the palette that was given to me with the Spruce village, just varying it a little bit, adding things like bone block and some red wool for a flag signifying the colors of this town. This big building here is going to be a little bit more of a customs office. They'll deal with the shipping and stuff that comes in. And for that, I put a flag on it, a little clock tower so that people know what time it is when they get here, and a crane at the front. There's also a balcony over to one side. The other building is a bit more small. It's going to be more for the fishing side of things. I loved being able to add lots of small details, such as all of these crates and barrels. It was a lot of fun to imagine what would be on the docks. Now let's move a little bit further inland towards this inn. I thought if people were going to visit this village, they would need somewhere to stay, right? So having an inn is probably a good idea. I went with a pretty basic shape here. You can see when I'm doing my buildings, I'm marking out pillars for the structure first, then using full planks to mark out a roof, and then moving on to detail. That way, I can catch my mistakes before I get too far into the build. We're going to be moving our church to the other side of the village where it is better suited and changing one of these smaller houses into a marketplace. I wanted to add a little bit of color into this village because although we're sticking with the colors that were in it, which is mainly the spruce, I wanted to still have that little bit of vibrance. So a marketplace did that well. Now let's move over to this church that we just moved. I want to keep the original shape of the church, but just add to it a lot. So adding a lot of block variations, making it a lot taller, that allows a lot more room for detail, which I really enjoyed doing it. I love the way that this church ended up coming out. I even used some red stained glass for the windows because of course red would be the color of this town. Now that we've got a good idea of the main structure of the church, I'm going to just add a little bit more interest to it by adding these two little side halls to give the interior just a little bit more room. Now let's focus our attention to the center of the village. I'm tearing down one of the houses to move the village center a little bit. Instead of a well, I'm going to be building a bonfire where on cold winter nights the villagers can gather. Off to the side here you can see there's an awkward little path with a bridge leading into the river. I'm going to change this out for a cobble one and we'll come back to detail it a little later. Over here, there was a farm. I'm going to instead put a house there. I want to keep our farming most over towards the riverside and build some structures over here. So we're going to be going with a simple little village house with a 2-layered roof and a chimney, of course. Now, for this village, I tried not to adjust the natural terraforming too much, but I do adjust it a little bit here just to make it a little less rough, so I can add a little beet farm off to the side of this house for some detail. After this, we're going to focus on these two smaller houses. I'm not personally a fan of the two smaller houses in villages. They don't have a lot of interior room, so I instead combined the houses and made one slightly larger house. Now, in the center of our village, we have the two biggest houses in this village, which are those L-shaped houses. So I wanted to make sure at least one of them stayed to that larger size, so I made a very large L-shaped medieval house. I think this suits well in the middle of the village here and really fills it out. Like perhaps some of the richer merchants stay in this house. Now that we've got some of these structures in place, this village is really starting to come together. I'm going to go through and adjust some of the paths and add some of these torch street lights just to help out adding some detail. I'm also going to adjust the diagonal path going up here to our bridge. Once this is done, we can focus our attention on the river, and this is the side where I wanted to focus the most of our farms. So we're going to be building a little farmhouse right on the side of this river. It's going to have a little pen on the side for some animals, of course, and we're going to be transforming that field that you see there into a wheat field that goes along the riverbed. Once this is finished, it's time to focus our attention to the river, where I add some rocks along the shore to stop erosion, and then work on the bridge details as well as a guard tower guarding the entrance to that river. I think that's a very nice addition, and it makes this place look very medieval and castle-like. Now we're going to be mirroring that guard tower that we just did and making a diagonal gate entrance here to our castle. So I did a little bridge where the guards could walk over and see who was wanting to enter. Of course, because our castle's on the other side of the river, we're going to need to connect a bridge. So I went with the same design as before, but this one is on a diagonal, just adding a little bit more interest to this town. I'm working on our pathway going up into the mountain, and because this castle's on a mountain, it allowed me to make it a lot more pretty as opposed to defensive. An important part of building any larger structure is going to be doing the wireframing. Doing this allowed me to see what it was going to look like from below where our village is. I thought of this castle as more of a background, so from the village you're going to be looking up at it, and the village is in the foreground, so it's going to be a lot more detailed than our castle. For the castle, I wanted to focus on surrounding it with walls, but also making it very, very pretty. So down here we have sort of a shorter wall connecting to the gates, and then we start on the main hall of the castle. I'm doing the roof of the castle very similarly to that of the houses so that it all ties together. Then I'm doing a fancy tower connecting it. I even did some red accents because of course that is the color of this village. I love doing the taller peaked roofs on this. It really looks fantastic during sunset. Now that the largest part of the castle is in place and a lot of the details are in, we can focus on this back side of the castle, where I'm going to be building 2 turrets. This first one is going to have a roof on it and be fairly tall. I'll even put a flag on the top in the color red, of course, connecting a diagonal wall between this turret and the main castle tower. And then I'm going to be doing a smaller building off to the side with that same roof shape, some anvils accenting it, and the bone block, of course. Now I'm going to be connecting a straight wall to another turret. This turret is going to be more of a connector, maybe having a stairwell inside that'll connect the different layers of wall. This is where things got really tricky, because on this side of the mountain it's a very steep cliff. At first I thought it would be a good idea to do another diagonal wall, but this ended up looking kind of awkward, and after I finished some basic detailing, I went back to this to do it in a more basic 90-degree angle. But the plus side of this was that it gave me lots of room to detail in a very basic way, but it allowed me to put some cannons up on the top there for a nice detail. I really enjoyed getting to build those and think about the defensive strategies of this castle, if it had any. This wall down here is looking a little bit lonely, so I'm going to be adding one more tower to tie it all together, and then we will call our castle done. I'm going to be connecting a path to the doorway, then we can turn our attention back to the village, where there's one more house that needs to be constructed. So for this house, we're going to be going with a very basic village house shape, just a tiny one, and then we can focus on some of the smaller details of the village, like for example placing hay bales and grass around. We'll also want to place a cart up here to deal with some of the wheat, bringing it back and forth. We ended up placing a couple carts in this village. We're also going to be going with a wheelbarrow. Isn't it annoying how signs break path blocks? Ah well. And of course there's one more farm over here to transform. We're going to be doing some potatoes. Villagers are so ungrateful sometimes. They really like to get in the way while you're building, and they don't like moving very much. But I think they were grateful in the end for their new village. Alright, this town is really coming together. Now on the other side here, it's looking a little bit empty. This is where I went ahead and added 2 more structures that really helped fill it in. So this village did not spawn with a blacksmith, but I decided to make my own just to help fill in this area, give it a little bit more atmosphere. This village had a path heading off into the forest. I decided that it would be a cool idea to give the villagers a lumberyard to do some of their woodworking up here. Just a simple shed shape with just a roof and no walls, and then lots of chopped down trees in the area, and of course a saw chopping a log in half. I thought that was a really nice detail. Now we need to work on a watchtower guarding the dock here. It matches all of the other towers, of course, so we can bring that theme throughout the entire village. And of course, it has the flag. Now, you remember at the beginning how many trees were in this area? There were so many. This place was absolutely buried in trees. Well, it's time to add some of our own trees. So for these trees, I'm going to be marking them out with gold, eventually replacing them into the full oak logs, adding a couple of mushrooms to kind of look like some pine cones, and then pasting them all around, rotating as I go. I really think that this brings the village to life and really finishes it off. As a final touch, we're going to add a little fishing boat leaving our dock area, and then it is finished. I hope you guys loved this extreme transformation. It was so much fun to go back to building the basics and work on this scale again. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye!